The Mariana Trench, 7 miles of liquid darkness. Down here, the weight of the ocean is enough to crush a titanium hull like a soda can. My team and I lived in a pressurized bubble we called Aegir. We were there for the biology, to find life where life shouldn't exist. I loved the crushing silence. It felt like being the only soul in a cathedral built of shadows. It started at 03 Zulu. I was monitoring the hydrophone arrays, listening to the tectonic groans of the Earth's crust. It's a rhythmic, organic sound. But then, a new frequency hit the sensors. It wasn't the crust. It wasn't a whale. It was a clean, artificial pulse that bypassed our acoustic filters entirely. I boosted the sonar gain. On the 3D mapping display, a shape emerged from the silt of the Hadal zone. It was massive, a perfect dark sphere, half buried in the trench floor. The sonar pings didn't just bounce off it, they seemed to be absorbed. "Sarah, wake up," I whispered over the comms. "We have a contact, and it's looking back at us." The sphere wasn't just there, it was active. Our thermal sensors flared white. The surrounding water, which should have been near freezing, was boiling around the object's surface. Yet there were no bubbles, no steam. It was a heat signature that defied thermodynamics. It sat there, 10,000 meters down, glowing with a cold, internal energy. I made the call to the surface. I reported an unidentified submerged object with hazardous thermal properties. I should have waited. I should have kept it between us, but the scientist in me wanted the world to know. 10 minutes later, our satellite uplink was severed from the outside. A heavy surface fleet was already moving into our coordinates. We expected a rescue team or a technical crew. Instead, we heard the heavy clanging of a specialized docking pod. The airlock hissed open, and 6 men in matte black pressurized suits stepped into our habitat. They didn't carry toolkits, they carried short-barreled tactical rifles and black box interference units. They weren't Navy, they had no insignia. The lead operative, a man named Vane, didn't bother with introductions. He handed me a tablet with a single document, Directive 7 Delta. It was a total seizure of the facility by the Department of Special Projects. Our research was now a state secret. "Dr. Thorne," Vane said, his voice as cold as the depths outside. "From this second, you are an observer. We are taking the station down to the object." They brought something with them, a massive, autonomous crawler called the Parasite. It was designed for deep-sea mining, but they had modified it. It was equipped with high-yield explosives and a drilling rig made of an alloy I'd never seen. They weren't there to study the sphere. They were there to open it, no matter the cost to the station's structural integrity. As the Parasite detached from the station and began its descent toward the sphere, the Aegir started to groan. The vibrations from the crawler's massive engines were shaking our habitat to its core. Dust fell from the ceiling panels. Sarah pointed to the hull pressure gauge. We were already at the limit. "They're gonna kill us all just to get a sample," she whispered. Vane's team ignored the alarms. They reached the sphere and engaged the drill. The moment the diamond-tipped bit touched the sphere's surface, a sound echoed through the water that wasn't a sound. It was a vibration that felt like it was shredding our very DNA. The lights didn't just flicker, they turned a sickly, pulsating violet. Vane didn't listen to our warnings about the structural integrity. The drill on the Parasite hit its maximum RPMs, screaming through the water. For a second, it felt like the ocean itself held its breath. Then, the drill snapped like a toothpick. The sphere didn't just resist, it reacted. A shockwave of pure kinetic energy rippled outward, hitting the station like a physical hammer. The violet light from the sphere intensified, bleeding through the reinforced viewports. And then, the hallucinations started. The crew began seeing things, shadows moving in the corners of their eyes, the sound of voices from people who had been dead for years. The sphere wasn't just a machine, it was broadcasting a psychic frequency that was rewiring our brains in real time. Through the external cameras, I saw something impossible. The surface of the sphere began to ripple, turning from solid matter into a strange, viscous liquid. It started to climb the cables of the crawler, moving upward like a sentient oil slick. It wasn't destroying the machine, it was consuming it, integrating the human technology into its own dark mass. The station's hull groaned, the sound of twisting titanium echoing through the corridors. "It's not an object," I shouted over the roar of the failing life support. "It's a predator!" Vane tried to radio the surface for an emergency extraction, but the only thing coming through the speakers was a rhythmic, clicking sound. The same sound I'd heard on the hydrophones, but now it was coming from inside our own walls. The sphere suddenly went dark. The heat vanished. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then a massive, bioluminescent eye, or something that looked like one, opened on the surface of the object. It wasn't looking at the station. It was looking through us, as if the 7 miles of water above were nothing but a thin sheet of glass. Vane didn't look scared. While his men were collapsing from the psychic pressure, he was frantically typing into his terminal. I saw the screen over his shoulder. Project Chronos. They knew the sphere was here since the 1960s. They didn't want to study it. They wanted to use it as a power source. They thought they could harness a localized singularity to rewrite the rules of modern warfare. The parasite was gone, completely absorbed by the sphere, but Vane had a backup. He activated the station's emergency ballast jettison, not to save us, but to turn the entire Aegir station into a guided projectile. He was going to ram the station directly into the heart of the anomaly. "If we can't control it," he muttered, his eyes bloodshot, "no one will." The station lurched. We weren't floating anymore. We were falling horizontally through the water, propelled by the emergency thrusters. The screech of tearing metal was deafening. Water began to spray from the seams in the ceiling. Sarah tried to reach the escape pods, but Vane's men blocked the way. They were on a suicide mission, and we were their unwilling witnesses. We hit the sphere, but there was no explosion, no impact. The moment our hull touched that liquid surface, the laws of physics simply stopped. The water around us vanished. The pressure gauge dropped to 0. We were inside the sphere, suspended in a pocket of absolute white space, where time felt like a physical weight pressing against my chest. In that white void, the station began to deconstruct, not break, but disassemble into its base atoms. And then I saw them. Not aliens, not monsters, but reflections of ourselves, thousands of versions of me and Sarah, stretching into infinity. The sphere wasn't a weapon, it was a mirror, a gateway to every possible timeline, and we had just broken the lock. I don't know how long I was in that white space, witnessing the universe unravel. But then, the cold returned, the pressure returned. I was back in the shattered remnants of the Aegir, floating in a cavern near the trench. Sarah was beside me, unconscious but alive. Vane and his men were gone, presumably consumed by the sphere. The anomaly itself was gone too. Only a massive, perfectly smooth crater remained where it once rested. We used a damaged emergency sub to make the agonizingly slow ascent to the surface. No one answered our distress calls. The ocean was eerily calm, but something felt wrong. The sky was the same, the water was the same, but the silence was heavier. It was the silence of a world holding its breath. When we finally reached the surface, the world had changed. Coastal cities were in ruins, not from bombs, but from tidal waves that had simply appeared. The sun was dimmer, casting a strange, sickly yellow light. There were rumors of a great silence, all satellites dead, global communications wiped out. The sphere hadn't been a weapon, it had been a reset button. Sarah and I found refuge in a makeshift camp by the sea. People gathered, huddled together, sharing stories of strange dreams, of seeing impossible reflections, of a pervasive rhythmic clicking sound that now echoed in the background of everyone's minds. We were survivors, but we carried a piece of the abyss with us. The sphere was gone, but its presence lingered. Every night I dream of that white void, of the infinite versions of myself. Sometimes I hear a voice, my voice, but not mine, whispering about doors and choices. The Mariana Trench was just the beginning. We didn't just find an artifact, we unleashed a gateway. And the universe, it seems, has just begun to answer.